Hi, everybody. Welcome to another chat with Fan Meetups. I'm one of your hosts, Jeremy Johnston, and I am joined by...
Angelo Corsino.
Yeah, and beyond just our work here with Fan Meetups and, patiently waiting to see if we're going to have a Fan Expo this year, we also play D&D, and specifically Adventurers League, with Unite the Factions. So if you want to check that out, of course, for all your fan meetups, go to meetups.fanexpohq.com. Or to find out where we're at, you can go to unitethefactions.com as we support, local events to the Greater Toronto Area and online. Again, as we anxiously await, the ability to meet in person again and have cool events. So today...
Can't wait for those.
No, definitely. Especially with this nice weather.
Oh, yeah. It's great outside.
Yeah. So we're talking about evil factions of the Forgotten Realms this time. We figured we'd, try to do something different than just rules and such. We might talk about lore, with some of our upcoming fireside chats as well. And so, some people might wonder, well, what is an evil faction versus a good faction? Or what's a faction? Or what is the Forgotten Realms? Or what are the Forgotten Realms? It's probably the best way to put it.
All very important questions.
Yeah, so evil, is generally a matter of perspective. At least that's the way I like to see it. We could talk just about that for quite some time.
Yeah, there's a lot of different views on that for sure, based on different do the bad guys feel like they're the bad guys, right?
Yeah, and that's really what they're there for. It's like it's good to have someone to defend against or fight against when you're playing a game like Dungeons and Dragons. And yeah, the whole good guys versus bad guys or good versus evil, is a common trope, in any storytelling.
Yep. You need to have some sort of protagonist, some sort of antagonist, and something in between that they're kind of vying for to make the story work.
Yeah. So while, the groups that we're talking about today, no, they're not necessarily, evil to everybody, but they're certainly evil to those that probably know better.
Well, for sure. They're generally evil is they're doing something that's going to negatively impact the majority of people.
Yeah. And, because we're talking about, good versus evil and, evil factions just in general, just going to let you know, as we always do, that, we're going to keep any questions or comments that come up, PG-13 or family friendly. So, don't worry that we're going to, go off the deep end here. It'll be pretty tame.
Yeah.
While still getting to the point. So the second question I was putting out there is, what is a faction? Okay, so factions are really just groups. Sometimes it is a nation, sometimes it is a guild, sometimes it is a group of refugees. They're just people that have similar views, similar goals that they align to, and sometimes they're recruiting new members and sometimes they're not.
No, that's true. Sometimes they are very exclusive and they will only actively seek out people to join them, and others will take whoever seems to align with their goals.
Yeah, and the fact having factions within your adventures, whether they are your own worlds that have been built within the game that you're playing, or just general D&D gameplay, they're an effective tool for providing quests, or just providing a little bit of flavor, for whatever it is you're trying to add. In this case, we're talking obviously about evil factions. if you're running an evil campaign, then maybe everyone's part of one of these factions. Or again, maybe they're just, who's causing problems for the party. Villains that come and go, and persist, because when you have a faction, well, maybe you took down, one of the lieutenants or captains of this, but, there's an arc wizard that's behind the entire faction that,
and even when you take them down, if you take down the Archwizard, that's the head of the entire faction, then it's the next man up, right? They're not going to let it go away. It's the next person's going to step in and take over.
Yeah, or maybe you're running a campaign like a mercenary campaign where you're a group of mercenaries of some sort, and maybe you want to take over one of these factions or create one of your own.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, there's just a lot that you can do with them. And then lastly, and briefly, what are the Forgotten Realms? So Forgotten Realms is like the most iconic setting of Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition. It's been around, since the 80s in Dungeons and Dragons. It's visited quite often in a lot of the adventures, and of course, Adventures League within 5th edition.
Yep. I'll say the majority of the content in 5th edition, the vast majority, is set in the Forgotten Realms.
Yeah, for any of the official published content and adventures, or even stuff that you might find on dmsguild.com. Mm-hmm. It is a place that is, medieval in terms of technology. It is high fantasy magic, not unlike, Lord of the Rings and similar.
I would say it's even higher magic than Lord of the Rings.
Actually, that's a very good point. Yeah, much higher magic than Lord of the Rings. Yeah. Good point, because Gandalf's magic, that while it seems powerful, it would pale in comparison to what you can do even in tier 2 of Dungeons and Dragons.
Like a 5th level wizard casting fireball is already pretty up there on the power level compared to Gandalf.
Yeah, we can't not mention Team Fireball when
never. There hasn't been a single one of these.
Awesome. Okay, so let's get into it. Let's start talking about some of the factions. So the first one we're going to start with is the Cult of the Dragon. We figured this one would make the most sense. It's one of the first factions that we were introduced to with 5th edition in the Tyranny of Dragons storyline, which was also what formed the first season of Adventures League.
Yep. The Seasons of Adventures League, just for a very quick interlude, kind of follow the various hardcover releases through 5th edition so far. And the very first one was Tyranny of Dragons.
Yeah, which has recently been republished, I think within maybe a year and a half. I think it was fall of 2019 that it got republished. It was originally 2 books, just because they were trying to get it out the door as fast as possible, just because it was the first published adventure for this edition.
Yep.
And yeah, it's got a really beautiful cover in its alternate cover.
Mm-hmm. And also, when they released it the first time, there were some very interesting things that, because the rule set wasn't exactly finalized, good times.
Oh, totally. And very easy to TPK your party in that adventure.
But bringing us back to our topic, the Cult of the Dragon, their main goal is to bring the 5-headed dragon Tiamat back from the 9 hells and have her walking among this plane and the world of Toril.
Yeah, and Tiamat being one of the ruling powers within the 9 hells is certainly not something that you would want to let loose on the world of Toril and the Sword Coast, where the Cult of the Dragon operates. The Cult of the Dragon may or may not have been successful. I mean, obviously that's up to the world and the way that you use them. They generally clothe themselves in green and black robes, and they're very open about what they're doing and who they are. Once they amass enough power, they're not worried about people necessarily stopping what they're doing. And of course, like many of the faiths of Faerun, they generally feel that they are free to recruit new members into the worship of Tiamat.
Yeah, they're one of the more open factions in that regard, where they are very active and they're very open, and they recruit anyone basically who has a love for dragons.
Definitely. Yeah, so some of them are quite fanatical in that regard, but they are organized. They do have lines of travel, where they're always monitoring the comings and goings of people as well as gold.
Gold
So that
especially.
Oh yeah, because they want to amass a lot of treasure for Tiamat when she will eventually return. And they greet the members of their cult. They have this kind of cool hand signal.
And sometimes they do it like this.
Yeah, because and it represents the 5 heads of Tiamat, the different colored dragons.
And the other one is for when she is holding back a little bit of her power to not reveal all of her secrets.
Yeah. So if you play through again that Tyranny of Dragons storyline, they feature like predominantly. It's really who you're up against.
They are very clearly the main antagonist.
For sure. And even through the resolution of what happens in that book, which we won't spoil, the Cult of the Dragon doesn't cease to exist.
Nope.
They pop up in a lot of different places, so they're very easy to use, basically in any part of a campaign, just to add a bit of flavor, little background stuff, or ways to torment your players, or potentially make them a part of the cult if they're into that. Any of these options are available for player characters, or maybe you even break someone out of it and they join the party as an NPC, or maybe someone's backstory would include being a former member of the cult.
Yeah, for sure. You can definitely have a lot of fun with that if you're building your own world, where you can put in all of the people that you would like as various NPCs and quest givers and such.
And just again, if you do have any questions for those that are watching this live, we do have a Q&A chat section where you can put anything that you'd like to have answered, and we'll do our best to answer it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let's move on from the Cult of the Dragon to, I know, evil from a point of view. So here's one that is definitely debatable.
Yeah.
And that is one of the 5 factions that gets used in Adventures League as well.
We debate this one quite a bit.
Yeah, and it's the Zentrum. The Zentrum are one of the 5 predominant factions of Faerun. They're mentioned in many of the adventure books, as well as Sword Coast Adventures Guide, and more in 5th edition. And they come up a lot in previous editions as well.
Mm-hmm. They are known as the Black Network, and they are a shadow network that is interested first and foremost in amassing as much wealth and power as they can, no matter the cost.
Yeah, they're a faction that operates almost like an organized criminal network.
Yeah, they're the organized criminal syndicate of effectively the Forgotten Realms, but they are morally gray. They have become more and more aligned with the goals of the rest of the factions of the Forgotten Realm more recently, while still retaining some of their profit first
attitudes.
Yeah.
But I would say that they're only doing this because it's to their benefit.
Sometimes you got to work together.
Yeah, exactly. There's probably some overarching, goal here and behind the scenes that that you can create. If you're the dungeon master, when using the Zentrum, they come off as a group that is helping the people of the Sword Coast, that aren't necessarily at war with any of the other factions, good or good aligned, of course, and can recruit people that way. But if you're going to get higher in the ranks, or make an impression on those that you'd be serving within the Zentrum, you're going to have to be ruthless, while at the same time being loyal to the organization overall. It's kind of
they have a very interesting dynamic.
Yeah, anybody can join the Zentrum, not unlike any of the other, of the, good factions that many characters had aligned themselves with, especially in the past. They were, pretty prevalent in the earlier seasons of Adventurers League. But again, rising through the ranks is going to, really require you to kind of step on someone's toes or get someone out of your way, however you see fit to, again, rise through those ranks.
Yep. They're also a group that is very, very well versed in finding two feuding factions, or like countries or nations, that sort of thing. Support both sides.
Yeah.
Support both sides. Once they're finished killing each other, kind of use that influence, the fact that they helped, to sweep in, use their power to gain a lot of influence in that new region.
Yeah, they just love calamity and see it as an opportunity for sure. And that's part of that is because they have a large network of mercenaries, almost like an army, and they make it available for hire, as well. Yeah, and of course they use it to their own ends as well. To protect their own trade routes, to protect their own interests and strongholds. Yeah, they're just opportunists. It would seem, there's definitely something larger going on. And again, even though everyone can join, it's not easy to figure out, who all the higher ups are, as, they kind of operate in cells, across, almost like a thieves guild, across the different, cities and towns that they're in. Oh, it's worth mentioning that their symbol is a winged snake. They generally wear it as like an emblem or a ring that they give to their members. So it's not like it's a secret society or anything like that.
Yeah. And they also, the reason why we have this debate now about them being truly evil or not is because they have become a lot more morally gray, especially recently. They did support the other factions in the Red War when they didn't have to. They could have just as easily thrown in for Thay, but instead which we're going to talk about later, but they stuck it out with the rest of the factions and tried to do the right thing, and it cost everyone.
Unfortunately, yes. They're also, interested in information. Obviously, they have their own spy network, not unlike the Harpers. But more than just spying on others, they're also kind of obsessed with spying on themselves and their own members. Rivals within the Zentrum will spy on each other, probably more than outside forces, because, again, getting up the ranks, isn't done by anything less than often murder.
That's true.
Or, or accidents that happen, right? Accidents. Yeah. So there's a lot that you can play with either as a character. So you're kind of a member of this kind of like Angelo said, this morally gray area. Makes for some great backstory, or even contacts that any character might have, regardless of their class. I mean, obviously some people might think that it might be only rogues, but nah. It was started by a group of people that included the famous wizard Manshoon. And if you haven't heard of Manshoon, I mean, some people aren't sure if he's dead, even though the Zentrum have been around for hundreds, if not 1,000 years. More than just is Manshoon dead, it is definitely known to those with the right connections that he has clones all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
He's
and,
got clones everywhere.
yeah, and one of those clones featured in the season 8 of Adventures League, as well as the book
It's
Waterdeep Gungeon
not just clones, simulacrums everywhere too.
Yeah, that's a good point too. So, yeah, it created a bit of a civil war within the Zentrum there, which, if you're interested in that kind of angle of how factions can play out when they're divided, inside themselves, can play out pretty interesting, especially if you have people on both sides within the party.
Mm-hmm.
Because
And
maybe some people want to ally themselves with Manchun.
all right, so let's move on to the next topic of our evil factions of the Forgotten Realms with the Arcane Brotherhood, which are based out of Luskan, which is one of the northernmost cities before Icewind Dale along the Sword Coast.
Yeah, so the Arcane Brotherhood is a group of wizards. They recruit wizards, into their ranks. They're pretty elusive. They like to keep a pulse on pretty much everything that's going on. They're looking to amass power to their own ends. Some people might think that, they're there to help the people of Luskan. Not to say that they haven't, but it's because it's served their own interests, again, in amassing power and knowledge of the arcane as well as the politics and goings on of the world.
Oh yeah, like they definitely aren't scared to go to bat for the town because having the town there is very good for effectively business. They show that throughout a lot of the different early novels. Even in the infamous Driz series by R.A. Salvatore, the video games Neverwinter Nights, and
Yeah,
there's even a section on Luskan and Storm King's Thunder where the Arcane Brotherhood has had some impact on the storyline.
yeah. They also show up in the last year's tent pole adventure, Rime of the Frost Maiden.
Mm.
They have what's called the Host Tower of the Arcane. It is a extremely large and wizard's tower with a whole set of towers within it, or arms that kind of are archmage towers for those that make up the governing body of the Arcane Brotherhood itself. And there's nothing gender based about the Arcane Brotherhood. That's just the name of the organization. In
Mhm.
fact, one of the most famous members of the Arcane Brotherhood, one of the former of the ruling, wizards, is Valendra Shadowmantle.
Mhm.
A lot of people think she's one of the Red Wizards of Fey. She's friendly with Fey, and again, we'll talk about the Red Wizards and Fey a little later. But yeah, Valendra is a member of the Arcane Brotherhood.
She used to be one of the top ranking members. She's taken more of a
Yeah.
backseat since she's off helping Faye, but definitely still affiliated with them.
Yeah, and through the novels and the editions, the Arcane Brotherhood were decimated.
Hmm.
And so you might be wondering, why are we talking about them and why are we talking about them in 5th edition? But, within the past decade, within the current timeline, we're currently kind of in the middle of the 1490s of the timeline of the Forgotten Realms. Um, the Arcane Brotherhood's 5-spired tower has kind of regenerated itself.
Yeah, it was blasted in an attack by Captain Durdamont, where he led all of the ship captains of Luskan, as well as a lot of other outside powerful figures, against the Arcane Brotherhood. They razed the tower, they kind of cleaned the place out, and then all of a sudden, the tower just started rebuilding itself, and there was a new Brotherhood.
Yeah, and this new brotherhood that kind of took residence in the restored tower, again, has kind of allied themselves with the people of Luskan by routing out the undead, and they even fought off a dragon that was menacing the city. But let's be real. Anybody that knows what's going on knows that they're just establishing a foothold, for what they'll be doing next.
Yep.
And as we mentioned, there's 5 spires in the tower that represent different influences, not just within the governing body, but how they choose to monitor things that are happening in Faerun. So, like the 5th tower is the Archmage Arcane Tower, so the ruler of the Arcane Brotherhood, and the others represent
called the Over Wizard.
Yes, that is a good point because it's a cool title. I kind of like it. And then they have the north, east, south, and west Over Wizard towers, where basically if you're in the North Tower, you would be kind of responsible for keeping tabs on everything that's happening in the northern parts of Faerun. And again, these people, while they wouldn't openly oppose each other, these 5 wizards that kind of rule over the Brotherhood, behind the scenes, they kind of are vying for power against each other, and they might even be plotting against each other to, have somebody have an accident or something like that. Not unlike, how people rise through the ranks of the Zentrum.
And they are, like Jeremy was just saying, they are responsible for their wing. They will often, when they're not focused on an outside threat of some kind, there are often their interplay consists of recruiting each other's like followers and that sort of thing, and they have this very almost healthy rivalry that goes on between them, where they're not quite there to destroy each other because that doesn't benefit everyone, but they always are vying for power.
Yeah, definitely. And speaking of, I guess the ranks and such, they are very select about their membership. The Arcane Brotherhood is known, throughout Faerun, and every year many wizards will, come to the tower. It is an academy as well of learning, and not many wizards will actually be accepted. Quite often, they're going to recruit people that they see as future rivals, just so that they can, monitor and control them as much as they can.
They look for the best of the best because if they took in everyone, they feel that weakens them as opposed to just broadening their horizons. It's an interesting outlook.
For sure. And I guess it's worth noting that, while there's, thousands and thousands of players of Dungeons and Dragons, within the Forgotten Realms, the truth is that high level magic isn't as easily accessible as it is to player characters.
Yeah, especially in Adventures League, which is kind of funny. But Adventures League, you get wizards casting Wish for the hell of it to give them the whole party resistances for no reason, as opposed to the actual kind of story beats where high level magic is like way above the average person.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. People aren't casting fireballs every day.
It's like, not with that attitude, they're not. But no, definitely. It's even like Fireball is above the majority of wizards in the Forgotten Realms that aren't effectively part of an adventuring party. That would be player characters and such.
Yeah, and I could see the Arcane Brotherhood, potentially recruiting a party member, maybe as even a spy for whatever it is that they're trying to accomplish over the course of your campaign.
Yep.
But again, maybe you want to become a part of them for the reverse. You want to infiltrate the Arcane Brotherhood and stop, the evils that they might be getting up to.
Which has been done in Neverwinter Nights, which has been done in R.A. Salvatore's novels, and it's always a good time. It's always a good storyline.
Yeah, I mean, as much as, we're talking about these factions and, just a little bit about them, there isn't a lot of information about a lot of these because, again, they're story beats, they're threads that you can pull on either as a character writing a backstory or a dungeon master, putting together a campaign or a side quest or something like that. Take and do with these as you will.
They're definitely designed to be open-ended, so that, and very almost not quite vague. There's definitely a lot of stuff you can find on a lot of these factions, but there's no like this is it wholeheartedly. There's always room for play for the exact reason that Jeremy just said.
Yeah, and you can tweak things as much as you want. If Valendra was never a part of it, then that's up to you.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, so now we're moving to my favorite evil faction in the Forgotten Realms, which is the Red Wizards of Fey.
Uh-huh.
Now, the Red Wizards of Fey are more recently now have like this massive population of undead servants that is like an army that is like where its generals are like vampire spellcasters, and they generally keep a lot of slaves, which they do actually treat reasonably well as far as like slavery goes, and they do that because you don't want your slaves to be awfully treated, because then they don't do as much work. And the reason why they do this is because they once they've stopped serving in life, then they become part of the undead army, and this is why Fey is very evil.
Yeah, but even the way that they treat their undead is different. But just to take one quick step back, more than just a faction, the Red Wizards of Fey, or just Fey, is a nation of humanoids far to the east of the Sword Coast. And yeah, it's a pretty beautiful place. If you visit there, it's probably the pinnacle of civilization for Faerun. They have a very established government and economy.
Their economy is huge. They are easily the richest nation on Toril.
Yeah, and they do business, with all the major cities, and all the major cities do business with them.
Yep. They have an incredible, like, and it's not even like it's spice trade, it's silks, it's magic, whether it's terms of scrolls or components or items. A lot of like Fey's, and they call it a lot of propaganda, but Fey isn't as bad as it's made out to be. It's just that the top end of the organization is incredibly evil.
Yeah. And again, going back to, their slaves and the undead, it's not like, the undead that you might be used to, where you have like wraiths and skeletons and ghouls that are, rotting and decrepit and shambling around. No, they treat their undead pretty well. They clothe them,
arm them.
And yeah, they arm them, and they speak with them.
Mm-hmm.
Like the undead, are a little
it's
bit more.
It's a lot of sentient undead.
Yeah, exactly. The ones that they make use of the most. Mm-hmm. And yeah, some of the undead might be people that have committed crimes, that have been put into eternal servitude.
Mm-hmm. And that is actually a very recent kind of outlook on Fey. It's actually only been in the last, I think, 100 or two, maybe like 3-4, just before the Spell Plague was when it started to kick off. Where Zaztan, which at the time he was only one of the Zulkirs, which was like the ruling body of Red Wizards and Fey. There's one Zulkir for each school of magic, and Zaztan was a lich, which he naturally slotted into the school of necromancy. At some point, he decided that it wasn't good enough the way it was going, and he started creating a larger and larger undead army, started saying to the other Zulkirs, you're going to join me or we're going to have problems. And eventually there was this big civil war. Yeah, he assassinated actually, I think, 3 of the other Zulkirs. And then they basically pooled together and formed what is now the the Red Wizards of Fey, which are locked under his command, and now he has other Zulkirs that are completely loyal to him that aren't part of the original ones.
Yeah, a Zulkir would have to be pretty brave, and there is at least one that is brave enough to be trying to overthrow Zaztan.
And we'll get into that. Actually, yeah. So the Adventure League series is actually doing a lot of like world building push into the Red Wizards of Fey and that sort of thing. With the Red War, which is where the Feyans basically came into the
City of Mulmaster.
The city of Mulmaster, which is basically in the Forgotten Realms region of the Moon Sea, which is very close to which isn't that like far away from the Sword Coast. It's far enough away.
It's kind of in between Thay and the Sword Coast.
Yeah, so it's kind of like, and I say that, and I bring up the Sword Coast because that's where like the majority of the content in the Forgotten Realms is set. But this halfway point where now they're kind of encroaching on the rest of Toril because they've now got a foothold in the city of Mulmaster and they annexed it, where the 5 factions, which one of them, which is the Zentrum that we talked about earlier, all banded together and tried to force out the Red Wizards in this massive battle and got their butts handed to them, basically.
Yeah. But they united the factions and they failed.
They did. And then with the Dreams of the Red Wizards storyline, they've even pushed it a little bit further, and now they've done things like they've introduced storylines where the Thayans are now there's kind of like this pushback from the factions again, and they've brought in even like an ability in one of the modules, and I don't want to spoil things too much because they're incredible and everybody should go play them, where they actually send you to Thay. And it's an incredibly like interesting series of modules.
Yeah, for sure. So if you haven't found a place to play it, you can of course buy the modules on dmsguild.com, and either run them yourself as a dungeon master, or hopefully get your dungeon master to run them for you, or again try to find them at an event. In Adventures League, they also have epics or multi-table interactive games where any number of tables can be playing the same adventure, and there are some Dreams of the Red Wizards epics. So far, 2 so far, and the Red War epic, although not part of the Dreams of the Red Wizards storyline,
it's very in that vein
campaign. It's certainly worth playing as it really leads into. And there are some community-created content, or CCC adventures on dmsguild.com as well, that feature the Red Wizards of Fey, if you're looking for more 5th edition content.
So Calvin has a very interesting question. So he asks, how would you use an evil faction in an adventure without making them the antagonist, either as quest givers, sources of information, or even possibly as allies sharing a common cause? And my answer, and Jeremy can weigh in if he has some different opinion, which he might, is to use them as like a morally gray reason to get your party to make tough decisions.
Yeah.
Like where they're going to be allowing you, where they're going to be coming with an offer of help, and it's going to be like, if you need to beat this overarching actual villain in the story, right? And we're going to kind of slot in and say, hey, we can help, but you might have to do some things you're uncomfortable with.
Yeah, another way to do it is that the faction doesn't identify themselves. They could pass themselves off as someone else. Or even a very powerful wizard could transform themselves with polymorph or true polymorph, and present themselves to the party as someone totally different, asking them to do something,
true
and
polymorph,
then,
not polymorph.
Yeah, for sure. And I thought I said true.
No, you said polymorph and then fixed it. I just wanted to reiterate that it's true polymorph that you're looking for.
Sure. Yeah, because disguised self is probably not going to pull it off too well. But just using magic, they could pass themselves off as someone else and give them a quest that they think is doing good or in their interest, when they've really lied about the whole thing. And once they've done whatever the task is, either they may or may not realize that they've done something, wrong or evil, however you want to spin it. And I'm not going to say what adventures feature stuff like that, because there are some really good ones that do. Season 7. So yeah, and yeah, the classic stuff where the enemy of my enemy is my friend, right? So they might
Exactly.
ally with one of these evil factions, like Angelo said, to defeat a greater evil. Let's see here. Zaztan is the leader of the Zulkirs and of Fey. He is a lich. Not saying that all of the Zulkirs are liches,
I believe
but
he's the only one.
really, okay.
Unless they've added new ones, because he assassinated a whole bunch of them, but he was the only one at the time, because he was the one for necromancy. And a big thing with Fae is that there's no method, or there's no kind of goal, or there's no like ritual or school of magic or thought that is too evil or too dark for them to advance in their power. They will look at every single thing, no matter what, so long as it will uplift the Red Wizard's power level effectively.
Yeah, they're going to experiment with magic and with people, as much as they want. Even in mundane things, like, with food and such, they got some pretty interesting ideas. But again, play through some of the stuff in Dreams of the Red Wizards, if you really want to kind of dive in there.
There's actually a lot of content in Adventures League that has to do with dealing with the Red Wizards of Fey, and it is all excellent.
Yeah, can't come highly recommended. We'll be sure to put it on, at one of our upcoming events.
Yeah, between the Red War modules, between the Red War itself, even bits and pieces of Maulmaster Undone, as well as the entire Dreams of the Red Wizards series so far, the 2 epics, and I think they're up to 9 modules that are all just incredibly well done, and like a window into how to like interacting with Fae, which is I find that very, very interesting.
Yeah, it's even though they're kind of evil to a lot of outsiders, you can actually go to this place and see what life is like there, and see that there's people living in Thay that don't really see Thay the way that a lot of other people do.
For sure.
Yeah,
like there's they've even a lot of people don't even know a lot of this stuff, but like Thay has like an entire like middle class of Thayans that are like normal. They're just people that are just like either servants to Zulkirs or like shopkeepers, merchants, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Like they're not all it's not like the whole civilization is evil. They've just got very evil rooted seeds at the top.
Yeah. And they have kind of weird like ways of controlling their people as well, beyond just the punishments or threats of death and undeath to people. They even have a rule about you're not allowed to draw maps.
Yep.
Anything within Thay.
There's also the longer your hair is, the longer you've been a slave. Yeah. That's why all of the Zulkirs and all of the actual Red Wizards are bald.
Yeah. And they like to put all sorts of tattoos and such, on their scalp and other parts of their body.
And those are actually, a lot of those tattoos are actually juiced with magic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
very, and it's very powerful stuff.
Definitely. And as punishment, those same tattoos or magical implements might be, burnt off or taken from them.
Mm-hmm.
And or they might lobotomize a wizard and throw them to the dogs, so to speak.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, they're pretty brutal.
All right, so I could talk about the Red Wizards for a lot longer than this, but we've got another one to talk about that my my friend and host of this show here is quite passionate about, and we want to leave at least 15 minutes to talk about this next.
So, all right. So let's start with Zaztan leading into this. So Zaztan, rules the Red Wizards of Fey. He has access to an immense amount of knowledge of all things magical. And yet there's one thing that kind of, one of many, I guess, but one thing that I'm going to talk about that kind of really bugs him about, Faerun itself, in that there is this ancient empire of magic that isn't really well known. There's still an influence, felt by this ancient forgotten realm. But there are very few people that really know what happened. And one of those people Zaztan meets is Larlach. Mm-hmm. Larlach is the oldest being in the Forgotten Realms and is a lich. And although he probably doesn't consider himself a member of this nation anymore, he was born from it. And this is Netheril, also known as the Empire of Magic. So again, although the Netherese and what they would later become, feature prominently in a lot of stories and adventures, when I run it, people don't really know what they're looking at when they encounter any of the lore, any of the items, any of the magic of this place, because it really is unknown. It really is a forgotten realm. And we're talking about the Netherese, right?
Yeah. Yep.
People don't know this language. It's a dead language. You're going to need magic to be able to read it.
Yep. Which is what they would want in general, to be honest.
Yeah, and even reading some of the recent tweets from Ed Greenwood, creator of the Forgotten Realms, he's like, you can count, using your hands, how many people in the current age, know a lot about Netheril and the ability to, read and write and speak it. It really is something that's long gone. And it's a place that is probably almost 6,000 years old, this empire. It was a human empire, not unlike the majority of what makes up Fey.
Yep.
Fey certainly envies the power that this empire had. The current age or year, again, within the Forgotten Realms for 5th edition, kind of where we are right now, is kind of the 1490s. So we're living in the 90s, so to speak. But this empire was like minus 3,830 years on the calendar, or DR. Again, they started out as, just a human empire, a non-magical empire in the Anorok area, which would later become the Anorok Desert.
Yep.
It was not a desert.
Nope.
At the time. Pretty lush area,
Yep.
But
it was like one of them. It was one of the like more like prosperous and like fertile regions in the entire Forgotten Realms, if I remember my lore correctly.
Yeah, but they befriended some elves, and they started learning about magic. And after a while, they kind of got obsessed with it. I mean, who wouldn't?
Magic's awesome.
Yeah, magic is awesome. And under some somewhat mysterious circumstances, there's a little bit of debate as to where they came from or who gave them to them. But the Netherese found or came upon a set of scrolls called the Nether Scrolls. And through these scrolls, they learned a lot about the different schools of magic. And through, study of these scrolls, discovered most of the spells that have been used over the course of Dungeons and Dragons' history within the Forgotten Realms. Many people, kind of started naming these spells that they were discovering from the scrolls after themselves, and established themselves as archwizards and started studying these things.
Tensor's floating disk.
Yes.
Spells like that, all the named spells, like Mordenkainen's Faithful Hound. These are all.
Same idea. Yeah. Yeah. Mordenkainen is from Greyhawk,
I
but
know, but just same idea.
But same idea, same idea. Like they're naming spells after themselves. Like everything had someone's name in front of it for any spell, whether it was
Yep.
Fireball or Mage Armor or anything. Everything had different names. And they did come out with a box set in second edition, Netherese Empire of Magic. If you want to learn more about it, like that's where you're going to get the most. It tells a really cool story right at the beginning, much like what I was describing of Zaztan going and speaking to Larlach, Larlach treating him like nothing, like a pawn.
So one of the most powerful figures in the entire Forgotten Realms. Larlach just looked at him like he was an ant.
Yeah. And eventually kind of told him, about Netheril and such. And that's how, this kind of information, got disseminated. And Zaz is one of the few that kind of knows the whole story.
Not many people do.
Now, so the civilization kind of split itself in two. They created what was high Netheril and low Netheril. And why was it high and low? Well, yes, it was, class, so to speak, based, but it was also like physically where they were. They discovered the magic of Mythallar, which are these large, sources of power that could be built using, many magics and many wizards to kind of form, the magic from the weave into these physical structures that could be used to power, great feats of magic for which they then, kind of it took them like almost 800 years to even discover the Mythallar. But even within about 100 years of those, of discovering the Mythallar, they started building what became known as enclaves. So these arc wizards would basically slice off the top of a mountain, flip it upside down, and build an entire city on top of and inside of what they had just kind of sliced off. The Anorok area of Faerun is kind of surrounded by mountains range on kind of both sides. So there's probably a lot of mountains that kind of, got sliced and diced as a result of this. And so each one of these cities was ruled by an arc wizard that was, studying or experimenting. And they kind of, attracted a lot of people of like mind, in the studies that they pursued. These Mythalars kind of also, became a source of almost like electricity, to the folks here on Earth, as it would power a lot of mundane, magic, somewhat mundane magical items. Like they had magical plumbing and magical washrooms and magical appliances for, cooking and doing everyday tasks. But of course, they only work within range of the Mythallar. But they had a lot of these, differing levels of magical implements that would feed off of these Mythallar. So yeah, there was at the height, there's probably a few dozen of these enclaves. There was even one called the Shade Enclave. They were very interested in the Shadowfell and such. But this is a forgotten realm, so something must have happened, and something definitely did.
So before we talk about exactly what happened, let's talk about how they got there.
Okay.
So right now in the 5th edition, we have up to 9th level spells. Back then, they had 10th level spells, 11th level spells, and exactly one 12th level spell.
That's right. And it's what would come to be known as Karsus's folly. So at that time, the goddess of magic was named Mistril. Okay. People, when they think of the goddess of magic in later times, know her, or a different her, as Mistra. But at that time, it was Mistril. One of her chosen of Mistril would have been, and still kind of is, Larlach, not to be confused with the chosen of Mistra. But Mistra didn't exist yet. But this is where Mistra comes into being, because Karsus had this, crazy idea that he would take control of the weave that makes magic possible, in the Forgotten Realms.
So just imagine being so bold and so powerful that you think that you can control all of magic by yourself, all of it, the entire weave. The weave
Yeah,
is what generates all of magic. You're controlling all of it by yourself.
yeah, and you're just a human.
Yep, you're just a guy,
You're just a human.
a powerful guy, but
Oh
just a
yeah,
guy.
yeah, you're an arc wizard and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, so he casts this spell. And
Yep.
boy, was that a bad idea. Because yes, he had the weave in his hands. He had all magical power at his grasp for about an instant.
He had it for less than 6 seconds.
Yeah, because he had the power, but he really didn't know what to do with it, or how to
Not a
control
clue.
it, or how it was connected to everything. And yeah, at that point in time, magic kind of ceased to exist
He
temporarily.
literally broke magic.
Yeah, so all these mythalars that are holding up all these cities, well, there's no magic anymore. They start falling. And
Yep.
that pretty much, is the end of the Netherese. Very few of the enclaves had, survivors. The empire was pretty much done at that point. And just quickly, yes, the Shade Enclave managed to get itself into the Shadowfell before this came to pass. And so, a remnant of the Netherese Empire continued to exist in the Shadowfell. They had a nasty time kind of being locked out of being able to return to Faerun, and having to, basically fight to survive in the Shadowfell against, the natives there. But over the course of a couple thousand years, were able to, maintain a foothold there, change their very being. Instead of
Yep.
the Netherese, they became the Shades.
Yep.
The ruling family, continued to exist on the city of Thaltenthar, on the Shade Enclave, ruled by Telemont Tanthul and his family. And they took on aspects of the Shadowfell, even within themselves, becoming these shades. And they were called forth. Someone was able to bring the Shade Enclave back into Faerun just over 100 years ago from the current timeline, and immediately started looking for what had happened to Netheril, what was left behind, of the different magics and items and such. And, long story short, there was a great event occurred when the Shade Enclave was brought down on the elven city of Myth-Drannor, destroying both.
Yep.
This
Destroyed.
And again, we started this out talking about, are they evil? Maybe from a certain point of view, and maybe from the Shade's point of view, Thaltenthar and the Shade Enclave were brought down by a terrorist wizard. It was terrible. People dying on both sides. Myth-Drannor was given the chance to evacuate. Not so for Thaltenthar. There's many refugees.
He's
Now,
talking about Elminster, if anyone hasn't figured it out.
Yeah, Elminster. Yeah, come on. Like, who drops one city on top of another? That's just horrible. Yeah, I mean, that said, there is a background that you can choose from one of the older season 3 Rage of Demons. Has a Shade Fanatic background that you can choose from. Unfortunately, with the newer rules, that it doesn't come with knowing the Netherese language.
He's talking about Adventures League stuff, by the way,
Yeah.
just for.
So there's still some great options, for using all of these different factions in all sorts of different cool ways. We hope that you've learned something that you can kind of tug on, either for some character ideas or campaign ideas, or that you might even choose to jump into some of the adventures that we've teased with.
Yep. There are always, like, every good story needs somebody to either go against, or, as Calvin brought up earlier, to kind of influence the party a little bit and try to get them to out of their comfort zone.
Yeah. So, thanks again for joining us for this chat. Hopefully, again, there's things that you can pull on or into, your own characters or games. As always, we appreciate Fan Expo, sponsoring these sorts of chats
And giving us a chance to talk to everyone.
Yeah, and also we hope that we can, bring these sorts of things to conventions with Fan Expo in the future. So thanks for joining us this month, and we hope to talk to you soon.
And have fun playing games, everyone.
Definitely. Bye for now.